Hello, digital warriors, and welcome back to the Forge of Unicorn podcast. Today we have an exceptional guest with us, Bryony Cooper. And with Bryony, it will be a very interesting talk today. Bryony, thank you, and welcome to our new episode, where today we will try to challenge with your experience, our research, and what we have discovered in the field of making unicorns.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
The excitement is mutual, and we will understand why, because Bryony is one of a kind. First of all, is a woman, not something that common in this field, isn't it?
We're a rare breed in this field, yes.
Yes, but also Bryony is not only exceptional for what she does, because she is managing partner at Arkley Brink Venture Capital, but she is also partner, director of investor relationship in another entity that is PT1. And we will go into this later. Why later? Because I want to introduce Bryony for what she has done exceptionally with her venture capital, because she, with Arkley Brink, focus on IoT, hardware, and AI, but not only, also on energy tech. So she has some interesting names in her portfolio like Cosmo Eye, Sky Trading, and Widows. And Bryony, without further saying, please introduce yourself because I guess that there is a lot to discuss today here.
Yes. So I've got quite a colourful background, I would say, and a very unconventional background for a venture capital investor. So in a nutshell, I've been in the tech startup ecosystem for over 15 years now. And I started off originally as a professional singer and a copywriter. So I come from a very creative background. I didn't study finance. I didn't go to business school. And I dropped out of university after my second year to pursue my first startup because I always had this very strong entrepreneurial spirit. And I just got swept up in the world of tech startups and became a serial entrepreneur, first of all, and had several businesses which, as you were just mentioning, were all in very male-dominated fields. My first one was in transportation technology. Then I did some projects in IoT and hardware. And I would always describe myself as tech adjacent because my skill set matches very well with tech and product expertise. Myself having very strong soft skills, communication skills, I was always doing everything else in the company from fundraising to managing the people to the sales and the marketing and the PR and basically everything that's the people-facing side of the business is what I gravitated to. So after many years of doing my own companies, I then kind of moved to the other side of the table, first running an accelerator for tech startups and a venture builder lab. And then 6 years ago, finally launching my own venture capital fund in Poland, which was Arkley Brink VC. And we now have 14 portfolio companies in Poland in some of the tech sectors that you mentioned. With AI, we've got some energy, renewable energy tech. We have IoT and hardware, one crypto, cybersecurity company. So it's quite broad, but lots of new and kind of fairly deep tech sectors that were quite new to me in the beginning of my career.
Yeah, I guess that is pretty remarkable how you move from your background to what you do today. And this is inspiring and intriguing. And I love the part that you say that you're focused on people. And so today's discussion is something that I would like to switch more on the people side of an investor, because a lot of people out there in the market perceive investors like sharks that are providing you money, and then they are asking you blood in addition of the money that they give you. I don't think so. I see stuff in a different perspective. And with you today, I would like to go into the human side of investment and tech. Yeah, go ahead, because I have something intriguing for you to jumpstart the discussion, but I would like to get your takeaway on this.
Sure. Yeah, I think every type of business is about people first. It doesn't matter whether it's tech or startups or, a corporation. But I know what you mean about some people think VCs are kind of evil and sharks, and I'm trying to prove that wrong because I, first of all, believe that you can invest into technology that will make the world a better place, which is why I'm now focusing a lot more on the energy tech side and environmental sustainability and climate tech. These are really passion areas for me. So that's the one side. but also as much as possible throughout my career, I've been mentoring founders as well. When I have free time, especially female founders who have maybe a similar experience to me, or first-time founders who just have no idea what they're getting into, to try and share some of the knowledge as well. From I think a lot of VCs are a bit closed and private about their practices, but I try to be very open because I have a lot of empathy, having been in their shoes as the founder, and I know how intimidating and how difficult it can be to approach investors. So I'm trying to make a positive change in this industry.
Yes, and this is why I would like to twist a bit the usual challenging the researcher purely as a focus of today's discussion, or more on a human side, bringing together our expertise as entrepreneurs, that they move out of being only an entrepreneur. Me doing mentoring and coaching to people, to engineering unicorns, and you to founding them. Because as we share with you with the research, what we observe in the market nowadays, especially with this new hype with vibe coding and Gen AI code assistant or even code generator, is that the tendency to have proper standards that are defining good quality for software, they are disappearing from the field. And also the expertise connected to good practices. I witness good practices of engineering in F1, and when I look at software with a lot of customers that we have, I'm not able to recognize these engineering traits in what they do. And when I talk with the board and even with the founders, a lot of time they are not aware that their companies that are founding, they don't have this engineering mastery. And people typically are shocked when we bring to the table this discussion. Do you have the same feeling when you went through your entrepreneur stage and now that you are founding so many companies?
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting to observe how AI is playing a part in how companies are being developed, because having started 15 years ago, this was not existing actually, or in common use when I was building companies. And so I'm only really seeing it from this other side of the table now. But there's always the risk that people can become a little bit too lazy and rest on their laurels a bit, when they have an AI tool that could do half the job for them. But, is it really giving the same quality as a human with proper expertise can? I think there's a lot of work we still need to do around looking at the ethical side of AI use, especially in creative industries. I think with any innovative new technology, people get scared that they're going to lose their jobs or be replaced. So we just have to remember, at the end of the day, it is a tool to enhance what you're working on and should be used as such. But, it should never replace the human aspects.
Yes, indeed. And in a few articles ago, we shared the concept of hybrid working, in the meaning that AI should enhance human potential, not replacing human potential. Because if we replace human, we lost all the emotional intelligence, all the creativity, everything define us different than an animal, or different than AI that can mimic only task of brain.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always preaching about, with my soft skill set, about EQ over IQ, right? So, if we just rely in AI for everything, the EQ goes out the window. And I think for me, that's been one of the most important aspects of building business, because throughout my career, whether it's been as an investor or as a founder, so much of it is about networking. It's about building human relationships and nurturing those relationships. And that's something that you just cannot ever replace with a tool.
No, exactly. And as an Italian, if we will replace IQ, design, fashion, all the stuff that we know about made in Italy, it would disappear. So I guess we have some proof that creativity and EQ are really two key players of innovation. And I was doing a few days ago an interview with a guy that is founding quantum companies. So also quantum is knocking at the door, and if people are there not able to catch up with Gen AI now, what they will do tomorrow when the quantum bits will overwhelm all the security regulation that we have nowadays. So this is also another fascinating point to let understand the tension that we feel time to time when we work with boards of directors. Did you notice anything lately about the tension that we observe in the boards when people they start to realize that the growth of their company is not anymore linear to become a unicorn? They go in the stagnation of mediocrity.
Yes, well, especially in some of the tech sectors that we are investing in. So, like, take hardware, for example. Maybe you've heard of the Valley of Death. This is like a very common period of the company life cycle that some survive and some don't. And I think new founders always start off their businesses with such huge optimism, which is necessary. Like, I think there's a specific type of personality a startup founder has, and you need to like have this almost fantasy belief in how great you can become, borderline delusional maybe, but you have to be really ambitious from the start. And then, of course, the realities set in, and there's always unforeseen challenges. It can be completely out of your control. So, if there's kind of like global, well, look at the world right now. There's so many things we could not have predicted, going back from the pandemic to the wars to people in government just changing constitutions. Like, no one can really plan for this when it comes to their business. And there's so many other factors that can impact it. And going back to the people aspect, a lot of companies fail because there's some discord between the founders or between the founders and the investors, that they don't agree with what direction the company should go in. And, just like fighting amongst themselves can destroy a company if you don't have strong leadership. And yeah, it can really create a toxic work environment, which can be the death of an otherwise great company with great technology. And I've seen this happen. And yeah, it's really important to nurture the people and to have strong leadership so that you can weather those storms when things start to stagnate.
Yes. And do you, because we observe this many, many times. So we step into a boardroom and we see the tension in the board. You can feel it in the air.
Especially when it's all men. There's a lot of testosterone going on in there.
Yeah, I have to say that it's gender agnostic. When you feel the board that is in tension, the women are more silent. You see that they are more receptive instead of showing they are absorbing. But at the end, you see a bunch of people, humans, that they are stuck in a silent fight. If we apply the concept of behavioral psychology and behavioral engineering, it's called the collusion. So you have two factions, investors and people of the board, so CXO, and they are silently fighting one the other. Because I had indeed a chat yesterday with another investor that probably will be a part of the podcast in the future, that he was talking to me that indeed it was exactly in this collusion a few weeks ago with a company that they found. And then the company asked for a rise of the fund, providing vanity metrics. But after a while, these vanity metrics, they disappear like bubbles up. and and they found themselves in a very difficult discussion in the board. As a woman, with all the empathy that you have, how you perceive this kind of discussion and how people can go out of this collusion, in your opinion?
So I've had a bit of a different experience in boardrooms where there's not been silence, but people have been very loud with their opinions and very opposing, and tensions have been really raised. I had to become very quickly an excellent diplomat and mediator between certain board members. So vanity metrics, of course, are a massive issue in the startup ecosystem. I think part of it is, of course, just overinflating to look more impressive, and part of it is just being too optimistic. And maybe they genuinely believe they can get there, but it's just not realistic. So my piece of advice to startup founders, when you are planning your KPIs and doing all of your financial projections, it's a good idea to actually have three versions. You have the ambitious version, which is always good to give to your sales team, for example, to try and boost the targets and create a nice, healthy, competitive atmosphere. And then you want to have the lowest, worst case scenario. So like, what's the least we could survive as a company with? And then the reality is going to be somewhere in between those two. And that's probably the one that you want to show to your investors, because investors want to see ambition, but it also needs to be realistic. And I think that's one of the benefits that I had from coming from both sides having been a startup founder myself and having to learn from scratch, because I don't come from a finance background, how to do those financial models, because I'm not a numbers person, which is kind of funny now that I work in venture capital, a people person. But yeah, I had a really good financial advisor, and he taught me this method of having the three models. And you don't show all the models to all parties. You show your investors the one that you can realistically obtain, and then you keep the worst case scenario private for you and your co-founders. No one else needs to know the worst case scenario. Yeah, and I think this can be one way to kind of like avoid failing to meet expectations of your investors. But the thing is, for very, very early stage startups, quite often it's just your best guess based on what data you can find. But until you actually launch your product and start getting traction, it's really just an educated guess.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess educated guess is the best definition, because at the beginning, especially a startup, they work with such a passion that for them everything seems to be achievable. They have the motto of rock the boat by definition. Otherwise, they won't be engaged in the startup ecosystem. The point is, what we observe is when you have a board that works like you have just described, where they check for reality, so I call it data-driven governance, then becomes easy to understand how to support, especially with hands-on capital venture, the company that you have there. What we notice is that because nobody knows how good software should be created, a lot of companies, they are stuck into the mediocrity because they don't know how to get out of it. And do you see recurring patterns of attempts from the governance, from the founders, from the CXO, to try to fix this derailing of the company not being able to grow anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I've personally witnessed some real tech failures. For example, when it comes to the time to scale the software on a much larger scale, then it's completely fails, because I think sometimes a CTO doesn't have experience of growing a company so quickly, and they've only been working maybe with small to medium size enterprise clients, for example, before. And when you go from having a few tens or hundreds of users to thousands or millions of users, it's a whole different beast. Yeah, so I think if you as I'm not an engineer myself, so this is the one part of the business that I couldn't go and get my hands dirty and fix, and it's very frustrating. But I think it's very important for tech teams to know their limits and to continuously learn and improve, and admit when there's areas where they don't have expertise, and bring in the right sort of support. So as you grow and scale your company and your team, you're going to need to kind of bat higher for more talented and more skilled people as well, to come and take the reins. So I think there's no room for egos in this situation, because I think an ego saying, no, I'm the CTO, I've been here since the beginning. If you reach the limit of your knowledge and you can't expand it much further, then you need to put the ego aside and bring in the help that you need.
Yes, because otherwise you will stop the company to grow more than your limits. And this is indeed what we observe a lot of time. The funny part that I love in working with startups and with company in general is that what is okay when you start a startup, so in seed or pre-seed, is not anymore okay when you start to become a Series A or B, because the kind of technical challenges in managing your product or service are so different that in seed version that you need to evolve. In seed version, you have a concept, an idea that you want to productize. But when you have a Series A, then you start to have customers that they grow rapidly. Are you equipped to manage your customer satisfaction to stay 5 stars, to evolve your product? If the product evolves, are you equipped technically to evolve your code base? From your perspective, what did you observe in this field as a people person, not a technical one?
So the whole startup methodology is great for the very early stage of companies. So when you're kind of from the ideation phase to like MVP phase, you can trial and error as much as you want, and ideally, fail fast. That's the culture. So whether it comes to what software tools you're using, or testing out different features and like bug fixing, and you can basically do everything in a test environment and with a small group of users, and you can make mistakes and you can learn quickly. But by the time you are getting to Series A and Series B and you have real businesses or real customers using your product, you don't have the luxury anymore to mess around like that. So by that point, you should have processes in place. You should have a good tech stack that's set up that is going to be scalable. You should have proper quality assurance and a testing environment before things get pushed live. I've even seen very big and successful companies roll out updates, and then you're like, whoa, this was not tested very well.
Yep.
And I've had experience in my first startup. We had some huge technical challenges as well, and we were doing a B2B software as a service for businesses that run their companies 24/7. So you cannot afford to have any downtime, otherwise they can't run their business. So this is a lot of responsibility that you have to your customers, and it's very important to make sure that you have that level of professionalism set up before you start expanding the business and playing with the big boys.
Yes. And the funny part is the customer. A lot of time, the feedback loop from the customer to the investor is lost in the vanity metrics. And this is funny to observe that the companies that they stagnate the most in the mediocrity are the companies where the founder is absolutely not aware of how the customer rates their product or services. And this indeed is the confirmation of what you just said.
Yeah. With my startup as the CEO, I was always on the phone with my customers. You need to depend on, first of all, get those early adopters who will be like happy to be your guinea pigs and they won't expect a perfect product, right? It's always great to have those. But as well, I kind of had to learn to consider which feedback was the most valid, because you have certain customers who just know how to shout the loudest about what they want personally. And then, of course, there's other ones who maybe represent a much broader segment of your target customers. So you need to also learn how to prioritize which features or, which bug fixes are actually the most important for the broadest amount of customers or the most important customers, and not just the ones that are shouting the loudest.
Yes. And I love your point because you are exposing the second really issue that a company typically face. The first is the technical excellence. So a company that builds software as a service, a lot of them, they don't know how software should have been built. So nobody knows how good look like in software. But the second aspect, if they have a great technical team, because I saw them on the field, is they don't know how a good product is designed from the idea to the delivery. Because a lot of them, they don't know even the concept of lean startup and lean UX, where the customer is in the center. So is this something that you observe also in other fields like IoT hardware, or is only something peculiar to software?
Yeah, so it's I was very lucky, even from my first startup, that we had a very strong product guy that had UI UX experience. And then when I was running a venture builder lab, it was spun out of a service design studio. So the design side has always been very strongly a part of the tech that I've worked with in my companies. But then I very quickly came to learn as an investor that is not the case for everybody. And yes, I think when you have very deep tech, quite often you will find, for example, three engineers with PhDs who went to university together, and even though they might be very, very talented, this is not a rounded founding team. You don't have all of the skills there, because most VCs will tell you that the number one thing that they evaluate when they're looking at a potential investment is the founders. Before the product, before the technology, before the market size, business model, we look at the founders, because first of all, do they have a skill set that can do the whole business, right? So yes, of course, the tech expertise or industry expertise is very important, but you need, I think it was it 500 startups that talk about the hipster, the hacker, and the hustler? This is kind of like the ideal balance of skills. So yeah, the hacker, of course, you've got the CTO, that's the hardcore engineer. And then the hipster is normally more like the chief product officer or the one with the design background, as we just mentioned, which is super important for human interaction, for usability, for hardware and software. And then the hustler, which is more like me, is the one that can go out and sell that vision, because you are always pitching, whether you're pitching to investors for money, or you're pitching to potential customers to start using your product, or you're pitching to try and win talent to join your team because they need to buy into your vision. Because normally as a startup, you can't afford to pay the most competitive salaries. So, they really need to believe in what you're building. So if you just have three hardcore deep tech engineers, they probably don't know how to sell the product, and they probably don't know how to talk to investors, and they don't know how to stand on stage and, or even to communicate with the other departments in the company. So that's one common issue I see in startups, is that you have the sales and the marketing people who normally have quite outgoing, bubbly personalities. They're used to talking to people all day. And then you have the tech team who are quite often more introverted or like sometimes shy. And to try and get a good communication flow between these two departments is so important, because as we just discussed, it's the salespeople that are talking to the customers every day that are getting the product feedback that needs to be fed back to the engineers to know how to develop the product. So I think as a founder or as a CEO, it's your job to facilitate that communication channel and make sure that it's a two-way, smooth process. And it's not always easy with the different personality types that you have in a team.
No, indeed. And absolutely, a company typically doesn't have this chemistry to fill all the recipe ingredients. So I saw a lot of companies that they have a great idea on product, but they don't have absolutely technical skill to make it. Or they have great technical skills, they have a concept, but they are not able to productize because they don't know how to sell, how to make out of this idea a product. So you need a end-to-end team that is capable of designing, implementing, and delivering, and then to sell it. Absolutely. And the smooth round of communication is absolutely the thing that we observe, especially in the board, in what we call the silent board war. That is the missing ingredient in a lot of companies, because there is too much risk at stake. People invest money, they want the return of investment, but then people, they live in the company and they have families. So there is a double-edged sword in this kind of investment, that if we are not able to detangle the board war, then on the field, typically after a while, you start to observe what you had said at the beginning, a toxic environment. That is not where people, they would love to work.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's when you start getting unhappy and unfulfilled employees that don't feel a sense of purpose or don't like coming into work. And you can't build a successful company with a team like that. I think a lot of bosses are a bit too... I don't like it when they say, we're just a big family here. No, you're not. This is your colleagues. It's not your family. But people that try to hide maybe a toxic work culture by having a foosball table or, free snacks. It's a very startup kind of thing. People look at Google offices and say, okay, we just need to throw some cool stuff at our employees and they'll be happy. No, you really need to create and foster an environment and a company culture where people feel seen and heard, and where people feel safe to bring ideas without, being ridiculed or reprimanded anytime. People need to feel like there is a path for progression in their career, and that they're not walking into an environment where there is a silent war going on, amongst their managers. So it's really not easy to build that kind of company culture, and unfortunately, for a lot of startups, they think about this way too late in the game. So I know from personal experience that it's like a snowball. Like once the roller coaster starts, you can't get off, and things can move very quickly. Your team can grow from like 2 people to 20 people to 200 people remarkably fast if you're successful as a startup. And if you don't establish that company culture right from the start, you lose control very quickly. And managing that many people and that many personality types and that many egos, and that many, people from different cultures, it can very quickly get out of control.
Yes, out of control, because most probably a lot of people that then invest in a great idea and then that's to scale, they don't know what they should add in the recipe. And this is absolutely the point that we are observing, because a lot of companies, they undergo into this stagnation, and then they say, okay, let's embrace this kind of new technology, agile, DevOps, let's do Gen AI code, and now this vibe coding. What they miss is the why and the how, because these are only tools. And with my mechanic background, my brother especially was telling me, if you have an hammer, typically you are looking for nails. And if you have this kind of tools, you are trying to fix every problem with them. But if we recall back what we were saying at the beginning, if a company scales from design and development to production, the agility, for instance, that they have in the early stage is completely different than the agility that they will have in production. The kind of team communication that they will have in design stage when they are only a team of 10 people, for instance, it would be different when they will scale to a team of 100. But the tool is the same. How you use it is completely different. Do you observe that a lot of companies, they are embracing blindly this cookie cutter without knowing really how to use them?
It's a bit hard for me to judge because, we, as an investor, we try to only be hands-on when we're needed. And if the company is running fine, unless they ask for help, we can take a back seat. So, yeah, I think it depends on the expertise of the founders. Because, for example, first-time founders, I think, will fall into that trap. Whereas serial founders who have built multiple companies before, even if they've failed, they learn what not to do. And so I think that the serial founders I work with are managing that quite well. But as I said, I've been 15 years ago, we didn't have any of these AI cookie cutter tools at our disposal. So yeah, it's an interesting observation right now to see how people are adopting these tools, but I don't have super deep insights into the tech teams of the companies we invest in.
Yeah, it's something that we are still observing, because all this new revolution with people trying to replace coders with AI without knowing that on the field there are also engineers, not only coders, is something indeed that is going on in the last 2 years. And now they start to share the first research, and the data are pretty alarming. There is an intriguing research that is trying to attempt to resolve Upwork task management and development with AI. And they set a budget of 1 million as a final reward. And the AI replicated agent that is mimicking the management is able to reach roughly nowadays 45-50%. The AI that is trying to mimicking a coder, a freelancer with canonical development issue, is reaching 23-25%. So
Yeah. I mean, when you look at any industry, it's still laughable. I mean, of course, how much AI has developed in the last few years is very, very impressive, and there are some incredible applications out there. I'm personally more of a fan of the B2B applications or like industrial applications, but when you look at, for example, AI girl bands, or when it tries to write a movie script or anything from the creative industry, it's just silly, right? It's not even close to being anywhere near as good as a human. So I can only imagine that that's the same for coding.
if for code is even worse. I tell you why. For scripting, let's say that we have to use AI to generate a script of a theater stage. We have a lot of great theater books that can fill the model to use it, from Shakespeare to whoever you want. But if we look at code base, how many code base were built in the proper way?
That's a good
Look at
point.
the disaster. Look at the disaster that we have in the last period. CrowdStrike, Boeing, Volkswagen, and we can go ahead for months discussing about gigantic failures. So we don't have the Shakespeares out there of software, or better, they are there, but they are a niche. And this niche is something that the market doesn't want to accept, probably because they are so rare that nobody can find them. And indeed, we were looking to understand how many of these good engineers a company is able to hire in their hiring canonical process. And this roughly 1% of them. And they immediately jump out of the boat because the environment is not the environment for a unicorn. because it's a mediocre environment. So the challenge that we saw all the time is how helping organization to upskill the human material that they have there, because this is for me the real game changer. It's not looking for unicorns or hoping that with some super glue you attach the horn on a horse and it's becoming a unicorn. You have to do something that is completely different, and the market is stuck, from my opinion, in this perpetual research of unicorns instead of building unicorns. Is this something that you have observed in your experience, looking at people and their potential and how they grow in a company?
Yeah, I think upskilling is really important. And the most impressive entrepreneurs that I've come across in my lifetime are those who are so thirsty for knowledge that they never consider that they know it all. Like they're always on a journey to learn something new. And I think this can be applied to anybody working in any role in a startup. Like if they have that thirst for knowledge and they're willing to continuously improve their skills, then they're going to be a much better hire than someone that's just kind of like coasting. And in my first startup, we hired a young woman who had absolutely zero experience in product, and she just came in and she was like, "This stuff's really interesting. Can I learn about it?" And she kind of voluntarily started doing courses, and of course we supported her. And she eventually became the product manager in the company and had like the fastest career progression of anybody in the team. And eventually she got poached by a competitor company who could afford to pay her a lot more than we could. So, it just goes to show how like successful companies recognize how valuable those kind of people are and how valuable upskilling is.
Yes, you said it right. Successful company, they understand the value of these unicorns or human unicorns, because indeed the amount of work that a good engineer, a good product designer, they can do, the impact that they can realize is like from zero to everything. Because if you have the right product designer, you can create your killer application in the snap of a finger on the paper, testing it with your users. You don't even need a technical team. With the technical team to transform this idea that you have on the paper in front of you with the help of the designer and the user is easy. But if you don't have technical mastery and product mastery, then it's a guess of everything. Every day is starting like we are in a storm and we try to go home. You don't know where you will land at the end.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, with software development, this is like your product is kind of a living, breathing beast, right? It needs to be constantly upgraded, constantly iterated. It's never going to be done. It's so your team, your tech team, also needs to be constantly upgrading their skills, because that whole world is ever changing. Like what you learned in software engineering or programming 10 years ago is not particularly relevant anymore, I guess.
I have to say that this is absolutely something amazing to discuss, because when I was doing the university, long time ago, as you can see from the color of my beard, some technical practices of software engineering, they were there. So we knew how to create software. And indeed, it's not nothing new that the teams that they have designed the Apollo missions, they were all scientists. Now everybody can claim to be a coder. Yeah, okay. You go, you do your courses, and you move from a bartender to become a developer. But you miss all the background of how an engineer should work. That is not an issue if you join a company where you are recognized as a passionate apprentice and they put you with a mentor that will teach you, because it's how the society evolved in the mid age. But nowadays, how many mentors a company has to help apprentices to become masters? And this is probably the biggest difficulties that we are observing on the field, because a lot of these CTO or CXO, they are not able to recognize this as a problem, because they come from a background probably that this is not something that they are able to get with a number. I'm guessing here.
I think this is one of the challenges of, the whole lean startup approach is that most startups are beginning without venture capital or without too much financing available. Mostly they start off bootstrapping until they can at least kind of get a proof of concept enough to convince somebody to give them some money to continue building. And so you're working with very, very lean resources in the beginning. In a startup, the founders are normally wearing many different hats. Everybody has to do a little bit of everything because you don't have a full team yet. You start off with maybe like 2 or 3 people in the team. And only, you kind of go through phases in the company when you raise money, then you can hire more people, then you can grow. And you kind of have to, I think it's very wise for founders to be a bit strategic about that growth plan and really think ahead about, okay, when we get to that next stage, when we get our first customers on board, who do we need to add to the team? What skills do we need to bring in to, like you were talking, to be able to upgrade, upskill, grow, scale in a sustainable way. And unfortunately, I think for startups, so often they have very limited capital, and also they're kind of stuck in constantly firefighting mode or fundraising mode, and they kind of forget about, like I mentioned earlier, they forget about company culture, they forget about the importance of upskilling, they forget about who else might need to be brought in because they can only see what's happening right in front of them.
This is a fascinating concept because culture, from what I have experienced with behavioral engineering, is not only written on the paper. It's not something that you write in the statement of your company with the business conduct guidelines. It's the expression of how we behave inside the company. Because when we punch the badge on the card reader in the morning, people silently switch to another mood. You're not anymore a mother or a wife or an husband or a dad. You are an employee. And when you do this punch with the card reader, you silently switch. So how you behave in that environment, that is a captive environment, is defining the rules of the environment. And if a startup, and then also this is applicable to an organization in larger scale, the behavior are not optimized for growth, you cannot grow. You cannot expect that a tree grows without water. And if the behavior of nurturing the tree with water is not there, the tree will dry and will become a dead tree soon. And this is the same stuff that a lot of organizations, they are not able to see, because I believe that we have a lack of understanding in behavioral engineering in the boards and also on the investor side. Because a lot of investors, they have fantastic governance programs, but not that many, they have a program that can help to change the culture of an organization. Did you know that, for instance, there are studies that they can put behaviors of people and how they interact with themselves inside the organization with data? They are called sociometrics. Have you ever saw something like this in boards, in investor discussing with your peers?
Rarely. I feel like from the experience I've had, investors or boards will kind of only intervene when they see that things are going really badly. So, and again, that's often too late. So rather, prevention is better than cure, right? So rather than making sure that the company sets up that healthy company culture from the beginning so that they avoid running into problems like a toxic work environment or, people getting burned out, they're rather doing the, crisis intervention when they've already reached that stage, unfortunately. Yeah, and so I was very lucky to be raised by my mother. She works in, her specialization is interpersonal skills in the workplace, and she trains managers or university lecturers or, anyone that kind of is working with a larger amount of people in their soft skills and how to get the most out of your people, how to communicate effectively with different personality types. And so I've grown up in an environment where, I kind of learned some of those skills through osmosis. And I think that really, really helped because the thing is you come across some very extreme personality types in business. Like when you find CEOs of large companies, quite often you might find some narcissistic traits, some sociopathic traits, because these are people that are drawn to positions of power. And they might be brilliant and they might be charming, but they are hard to work with, and you better be prepared. Yeah, so I think this is something that investors should think about, because they could be saving themselves a lot of problems later on if they were encouraging that from the start.
Yes, indeed, even a rose has these thorns. You have to know how to grab it, otherwise you will get a punch. But the point that you raise here is fantastic, because is the term that you use, osmosis. Your mama did with you indeed what I was telling you, that is the concept of a mentor with an apprentice. So that the apprentice, through osmosis, through repetition, through correction of dysfunctional behavior, is moved toward a role model.
Yeah. And actually, this is why leadership is so important. And, not just at the very top, but, department heads as well. Because, you know the expression, the fish rots from the head?
Yes.
So if you've got managers or founders or, executives in your company who are behaving badly, maybe they are throwing their temper around, or, just not setting a good example in some way, or they just think that they are above the rules and that they don't apply to them, then this really, really negatively impacts the entire organization. And I think that every executive in every company has a responsibility to better themselves as managers in their people skills, in their management skills, in their leadership skills. And that should be a constant journey of improvement. Because, if you just think that because you're intelligent and because it was your idea to found the company, if that's enough, it's not enough.
No, it's not absolutely not enough, because what you see there, you then get as a result. And if you see the dysfunctional behaviors, then they will start to spread like weeds in the field. And suddenly you will surround yourself in your company with mediocre that have dysfunctional behaviors. So a role model is really important. And this is why we are so excited of behavioral engineering, because when you see dysfunctional behaviors in a company, starting from the board to the team, you can silently creating behavioral prompts that are changing it in a not harmful or violent way, because there is always in a change
Not an
the
electric
trauma.
shock.
Not an electric shock, even not a punch in the face. It's something a lot more gentle, a lot more behaviorally engineered, because you have to avoid the emotional trauma. Because if you realize that your behaviors are harmful to others, or you are a serial killer, that you get some reward of providing pain to others, or you will have some regret and remorse, and then you will start to lose your self-esteem. So it's a journey that is complex but rewarding, because you can help everybody in the chain, from investment to user, to get the satisfaction that they are looking for. Because if I purchase a product from your company, I look to enjoy it. And then I'm really happy to provide you the money that they will go back to the investors, and everybody will be happy in the final picture. But yeah, it is fascinating, and so technical problem that seems to be so small and niche is indeed a problem that is so normal, because it's the interaction of people.
Yes. And I think thankfully the situation is gradually improving with in terms of the hustle culture that's been pushed from the top down from investors onto startup founders. When I was coming up in my early career, it was still very much that culture of you must work as much as humanly possible, the most hours you possibly can in the day. You cannot have any life outside of your company. And this was really a strong message that we got from our investors. If we wanted to take a day off, we were lazy, we didn't care enough about the company. There was really a lot of emotional blackmail going on. And I had a very severe burnout a lot of the topics that we've touched upon today, actually, about, unfortunately, I had a co-founder that became a very toxic influence in the company, and with a very bad temper and very erratic behavior and huge ego and lots of issues that just basically created an environment that people felt scared to come into work, and for me to have to go in and do that firefighting every day to kind of try and protect my team from this very angry man who was the biggest shareholder, it was it was very, very emotionally draining, and you kind of end up just going on to autopilot because that's the only way you can cope, and it's not a healthy state to be in, and it's not sustainable, and at some point it's not going to work anymore. So yeah, I think like being aware of burnout is something that every investor should consider from day one when they're like getting to know the founders. And this is something that PT1 actually does really, really well. I think that the managing partners here are so attuned to look out for the early warning signals and to offer support to founders on that kind of more emotional level and not just on a business level. I was really pleasantly surprised to see that in action here. And it's one of the things that sort of attracted me to the team here.
Luckily, it's something that we start to observe in the last 2-3 years, probably. Because finally, there are research that are showing that indeed disengagement and burnout are two alarming signals for the organization, but also for the society, because they have repercussions that can go to extreme cases of suicide. So it's a tough matter that people, they need to be not only aware, but they need to know that probably my generation and the generation before me, coming from the Second World War, they have this tendency you have to do more because you have to rebuild stuff. And for me, I didn't experience burnout, but I experienced so many injuries with sport that I got 41 surgeries. So,
whoa, that's a lot.
yeah, I have a good pedigree with the doctor, and this brings you to understand that at a certain moment. Enough is enough. You cannot push yourself and asking the others to go this extra mile. And so well-being and self-love, they need to be part of an investment portfolio. But I don't know how many companies from the investor to the field, they are able to apply these rules. That is one of the problems that indeed we are observing. And hopefully it will start to become a matter of awareness and a matter of actions in the future, because I guess that now with AI and all the layoffs that in the last 2 years are occurring, we need to have a wake-up call.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there are families.
I think it's just common sense, because applying so much pressure to founders is literally counterproductive, because they will just run themselves into the ground, and then once a founder has burned out, they're useless to anybody. It takes a long time to recover. This is not like go on holiday for 2 weeks and come back renewed. No, like they'll be out of the game for a year probably. And there's so many studies, and I'm sure you know about this actually, that show people are much more productive when they're, for example, like doing a 4-day work week, which I don't know if will ever really apply to the startup world, but
I don't think so.
Working every hour of the day is not how you get maximum productivity, and you can look at any statistics to see that. So I don't know why they were peddling this philosophy for so long. It just doesn't work.
No, but I have to tell you that one of my last startup was in intelligent transportation system. And in transportation engineering, you have a concept that the moment you utilize your infrastructure 100%, you have a traffic jam. So if people, they believe that the highway has to be used maximum 80% to have still something that can work, and then there are a lot of algorithms that can explain you that if we have a break of more than 35 kilometers hours with a certain amount of utilization on the highway, you can predict that in 2 hours it will be completely traffic jam.
Okay? Yeah, that's a really good metaphor.
How people can expect that a human being that is not an infrastructure built to this throughput can perform always more than 100%. I guess that finally investors and organizations, they will start to get this point because we have data. And data, in my opinion, are the tool to start a tough negotiation without the knife between your teeth. Because this is something that we observe a lot of time in boards. You go, you try to have a discussion, but because you lack data, then the discussion start to become emotional data driven, not data driven. And then people, they go with their cognitive biases, and having then a resolution of a problem becomes pretty difficult. I see the time is slipping between our fingers here, Beyond. And I guess it's a good sign that we had a good time today. Before wrapping up, I would like you, if you have anything else to share with our audience, especially due to your experience with women that they want to embrace this career path of investors or becoming a CEO on a company, or even to go into the technical field, because I would love to see more women as a CTO, for instance.
Absolutely. So I saw some sad data this week, actually, about the amount of investment going into female-run startups. I think for the last 10 years or so, it's been sitting about the same statistic, around 2% of venture capital going into female-run startups. And now it's reduced to 1%. It's like actually dropped significantly. And of course, this you need to consider with this data point that there just are less female-run startups in general to invest in. But yeah, we need to kind of encourage more young women to get into STEM topics, that can become the founders of the future. We need to have more role models in this space that they can look up to and that they can identify with. We need more, as I do a lot of initiatives for supporting women founders in the early stages of their kind of ideation and honing their pitch and knowing how to approach investors. I see a lot of supporting women. So it's really important to get men as allies as well and to be part of that conversation, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we face as women entrepreneurs is the unconscious bias. I think a lot of male investors have the best of intentions and they say, well, yeah, of course I want to also invest into women. But the unconscious bias is that, they just identify more with someone that looks like them and sounds like them and maybe went to the same university as them. This is just, basic human psychology, and it's pervasive in investment. And I would just say to women founders, remember that you're struggling in a world that wasn't built for you. Like most tech conferences, most business environments have been built by men for men. So it's no wonder you feel maybe like a misfit or the odd one out. You're up against a challenge from day one. But one of the best qualities you can have as a founder is resilience. And this is something I've built in spades over the years. So yeah, I think it's just really important to find your community, find your support network, get a mentor. One for skills, for upskilling, and one for emotional support, I would say.
Yes. But also I would like to recall people to the memory of the old days when engineering was a thing, and teams were built in a different way, where women, they were in the team. The Apollo mission, if you look at the picture of the team, you can count a lot of women. So then the world changed because there was a high demand of developers, most probably, and a work that was less scientific and more labor chain like manufacture. Probably something that we can discuss in a further podcast, how the world of IT turn in manufacture. But for the moment, I will say that women, they want to start startups, or even men that they want to start startups, but taking the angle for the proper empathy that you need to start the right culture, they found a good mentor and a role model in you, so they can connect with you absolutely. And if they want to upskill their technical stuff, they can use our open source version of the software craftsmanship dojo, because there is the blueprint of guys, if your engineering team works in this way and you have the empathy and the human side that you are discussing with us today in the podcast, then you have bingo. You are on the trajectory of creating a good company. Maybe not a unicorn, because then you need more ingredients, but for sure it's a company where people, they would love to work. And this is something that I'm really proud of this discussion with you today, Bryony, because we have empowered others to understand that it's possible. It's not utopia having a good startup working environment. And I have to thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm really happy that I could share some of my experiences. And great to hear that you're building the tools as well that can help on the technical side. So we got some winning ingredients, I think, together.
Yes, absolutely. I strongly believe in that. And as you see, it's always the combination of two different sides of the coin that creates the coin. Only one side is a sticker. But good. For today, I would say that the time is past. It's a pity that we have to close. I want to thank you again, Bryony, about everything we have discussed today. And I hope to see you soon on the field. And for all the listeners, guys, thank you for watching. Smash your comment below, subscribe, and see you there, Digital Warriors, as soon as possible. Bryony, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening, and please remember to subscribe to the Forge of Unicorns to stay up to date with our latest episodes.